What if hazel eyes aren't actually one color at all? Most people assume hazel is just a muddy mix of brown and green, some in-between shade that didn't quite commit. But biologically, hazel is one of the strangest, most chaotic eye colors on the planet. It isn't a single pigment, it's a collision. A blend of melanin density, light scattering, and genetic crossfire that produces not one look, but many. And here's what almost nobody talks about. Hazel eyes don't come in one form. They show up in 7 distinct, commonly described visual patterns, each with its own visual signature, and each one quietly carrying a different ancestral story, sometimes linked to your DNA. Some trace back to cold, harsh Eastern European winters. Others trace back to ancient trade routes stretching across the Middle East and beyond. One type isn't even a blend at all. It's a banded, layered structure that looks almost engineered. Today we're breaking down all 7, what they look like, why they form, and the hidden history quietly written behind each one. By the end of this video, you'll be reaching for a mirror, because chances are, deep down, you already know exactly which type is staring back at you. Let's start with the showstopper. Number 1. The Golden Sunburst Hazel Eyes. This is the most recognizable form of true classic hazel, the one most people picture first. In this type, melanin concentrates heavily at the center of the iris, creating a warm amber core, while the outer limbal ring stays green or gray. The result is a sharp two-tone effect, almost like an eclipse caught mid-motion. And here's the part most people never think to ask. That contrast isn't random. It's a marker some researchers speculate traces back through ancestry. The pattern is often noted in populations with strong Celtic and Germanic roots, where recessive light-eye genes collided hard against newer waves of darker pigment. Neither side fully won. Instead, the genes settled into an uneasy truce, and that truce shows up, quite literally, in the eye. Amber pushes outward from the center, green holds the perimeter, and the boundary stays crisp and clean instead of blending smoothly the way most hazel does. Biologically, this happens because melanocytes, the cells responsible for pigment, cluster near the pupil during early development, then taper off sharply before reaching the outer rim. The sharper that taper, the more dramatic the sunburst effect becomes. This pattern is often noted, anecdotally, in regions where intermarriage between fair-eyed and dark-eyed populations was common but never fully blended. Places like the British Isles, the Rhineland, and parts of Scandinavia. Over centuries, this left light and dark eye genes sitting side by side, sharply divided, rather than merged into one shade. So if your eyes look like a small eclipse is happening inside them, golden at the core, green at the edge, with a clean line between, you're not just hazel. You're carrying the Golden Sunburst, and your ancestors fought this exact genetic battle for thousands of years. Next, number 2, the Olive Mosaic Hazel Eyes. Where the Golden Sunburst is sharp contrast, the Olive Mosaic is its opposite. This type is defined by a seamless, even distribution of pigment, producing a soft, earthy olive green or muted hazel brown that shifts subtly with the light around it. Because the pigment is so thoroughly scattered, this color can look slightly muddy or dusted up close, with no sharp boundaries anywhere, no clean ring, no obvious burst. Just a smooth, gradual blend from center to edge, and that smoothness is genetically interesting. While the Golden Sunburst represents 2 ancestral lines locked in standoff, the Olive Mosaic tells the opposite story, one of stability. This even pigment pattern is often noted in popular accounts among Mediterranean and North African populations, where moderate, steady melanin production has long been common rather than the product of recent collision between light and dark traits. In these regions, sustained moderate sun exposure favored a middle ground of pigmentation. Eyes dark enough to offer some protection, but never as concentrated as true brown. This balance wasn't accidental. Populations that stayed in one zone for generations, without major outside migration disrupting the gene pool, settled into this low-conflict pigmentation pattern. There was no genetic tug-of-war to resolve, just a slow drift toward a shade that worked for the climate. Over many generations, this produced a population where hazel wasn't an accident of mixing, but a settled, inherited baseline, passed down with consistency from parent to child. So if your eyes look less like an explosion and more like a quiet, earthy blend, soft olive, muted brown, no harsh lines anywhere, you're not seeing genetic conflict. You're seeing genetic equilibrium, a trait your ancestors carried steadily, generation after generation, without ever needing to fight for it. Now we arrive at the most controversial one. Number 3, the Russet Dominant Hazel eyes. People with this eye color usually spend their whole lives writing brown on a driver's license, but they're wrong. A true brown eye is opaque. It absorbs nearly all incoming light and holds it there, dense and flat, with no shift, no shimmer, no give. The russet hazel is a subtle deception wearing brown's disguise. While it looks like dark copper or reddish-brown indoors, the deeper layers of the iris remain just transparent enough to let light scatter through near the edges. That's why these eyes look almost completely solid brown under fluorescent lighting, but explode into golden copper streaks the moment they catch direct sunlight. Indoors, the illusion holds. Outdoors, it shatters completely. This isn't a coincidence of lighting. It's a structural property of the iris itself, a thinner stromal layer than true brown eyes possess, just enough to let light through if the angle and intensity are right. This look is often linked, in popular accounts, to populations whose ancestors migrated along the ancient Silk Road, through Middle Eastern trading hubs, and into Latin American gene pools. Regions where the dominant brown-eye gene was extremely common, but never quite total. Centuries of trade and intermarriage along these routes meant the gene rarely had a chance to fully dominate in isolation. A small, transparent margin survived generation after generation, hidden until the right light revealed it. So if you've been told your whole life that your eyes are simply brown, take a second look outside. If copper streaks suddenly appear where you swore there was nothing but darkness, you're not brown-eyed at all. You're carrying the russet hazel, the secret hazel, the rare one that hides in plain sight until the sun calls it out. Now we move on to the single most visually fascinating type. Number 4, the rainbow hazel eyes. Most hazel types involve two colors gradually blending into each other, melting from amber into green or green into gray. This type doesn't blend at all. Instead, it displays three distinct colors at once, organized in clean, separate bands rather than a gradual fade. You'll find a pale gray-blue outer rim, a green middle ring, and a sharp amber center, the whole thing looking almost like a precisely painted target rather than something nature assembled by accident. Where other hazel types scatter pigment unevenly across the iris, this type deposits it in distinct, almost architectural layers, each one with a clear edge separating it from the next. There's no muddiness here at all, no soft transition zones anywhere, just three bands, three colors, three separate genetic signals stacked on top of each other. Scientists believe this banded structure points to something unusual happening during early eye development, melanin production starting, pausing, then resuming again at a different concentration before the iris finished forming. Each pause and restart leaves behind a visible ring, almost like a cross-section of tree growth, except instead of marking years, it's marking distinct genetic instructions firing at different stages of development. This kind of precisely layered timing is genuinely rare, which is exactly why true rainbow hazel is considered one of the least common types on this entire list. Rarer even than the chameleon variation we'll get to later. If your eyes show this banded structure, clear rings instead of blended color, you're not just looking at hazel eyes. You're looking at a living timeline, a visible record of exactly how your iris built itself, layer by layer, one genetic instruction at a time, frozen permanently into your gaze. Before I show you the last three types, if you've ever looked at your own DNA results and wondered where hazel eyes really fit into your bloodline, I put it all together in a guide called Where Do You Really Come From? Link is in the description. But stay right here because what comes next is the part most people completely miss. Number 5, the gray hazel hybrid eyes. This one is the coldest variation on the spectrum, and I mean that almost literally. Where standard hazel leans warm, golden cores, earthy greens, amber bursts, this type lacks enough yellow pigment to ever fully reach green. Instead, you get a cool, steel gray base with only subtle bursts of amber scattered through it, never enough warmth to dominate, never enough to soften the overall impression. The result reads pale, sharp, almost wintry, completely avoiding the warm, earthy tones that define most other hazel types on this list. There's no golden core here, no olive softness anywhere. Just gray, cut through by a flicker of amber that seems almost out of place against the cooler backdrop. Genetically, this low pigment look is often associated, in popular accounts, with Slavic and Eastern European populations, groups that evolved over thousands and thousands of years in colder climates with significantly reduced sunlight exposure. In these environments, there was little evolutionary pressure favoring darker eyes for UV protection, since the sun wasn't intense enough to demand it. Lower melanin production became the default, not the exception. And over generations, this pushed entire populations toward paler eye colors across the board. Not just gray hazel, but pale blues and light grays too. Sustained cloud cover and shorter daylight hours meant there was no survival advantage to retaining heavier pigmentation, so the genes responsible drifted toward lower output instead. The amber flecks that still appear in gray hazel eyes are essentially genetic leftovers, small pockets of warmth never fully suppressed by the broader cooling trend running through the iris. So if your eyes read more steel than earth, more winter sky than forest floor, you're not looking at washed out hazel. You're looking at the gray hybrid, a trait shaped by centuries of cold ancestry. Number 6, the flame hazel eyes. This type is defined by a single, unmistakable visual event. Instead of pigment forming a ring around the pupil, it splashes outward in one specific direction, like a slice cut from a pizza, or more dramatically, like a flame shooting outward from the iris. As a result, you might see a predominantly olive or green-toned eye interrupted by one clear, bright triangle of pure amber cutting straight across it. Asymmetrical, unmissable, and impossible to confuse with any other hazel type. There's no balance here, no symmetry, just one bold streak claiming territory across an otherwise calm field of color. This bold streak is genuinely rare, and historically, some cultures regarded it as a mark of luck, an eye that nature had singled out and touched differently than the rest. Biologically, flame hazel eyes occur because melanocyte cells, instead of distributing pigment evenly or even in clean rings, essentially decided to concentrate heavily at one specific coordinate of the iris and largely ignore the rest. Why this happens in some individuals and not others remains only partially understood, but researchers suspect it relates to extremely localized signaling during the earliest weeks of eye formation, a kind of genetic accident frozen permanently in place. Some have even speculated that minor asymmetry during fetal eye development plays a role, though the evidence is still thin. Unlike the rainbow hazel's neat, organized bands, flame hazel is chaotic and directional, more explosion than architecture. No two flame patterns look identical, since the exact angle, width, and intensity of the streak varies from person to person. So if one section of your eye looks like it's caught fire while the rest stays calm, you're not imagining it. You have the flame hazel, truly one of the rarest patterns nature produces. And finally, we reach the most famous and most unstable type. Number 7, the chameleon, or variable hazel eyes. You've heard this myth before. My eyes change color with my mood. Scientifically, that's false. Pigment doesn't shift because you feel something. There's no emotional dial connected to melanin. But here's the twist. The chameleon hazel eyes are the exact reason that myth refuses to die, because they really do physically change appearance, just not for the reason people assume. This happens because the eye holds an unusually delicate balance between pigment density and tissue transparency, a balance so fine that small physical changes can tip it visibly. So when you're angry, excited, or startled, your pupil dilates. As it expands, the iris tissue compresses inward, and that compression makes the brown and gold pigments more visually dominant, overtaking the green and gray scattering effect that normally softens the color. But when you're calm and relaxed, the pupil shrinks back down, the iris tissue relaxes and spreads out again, and the blue-green scattering effect takes over once more, cooling the whole eye back down. It's not emotion controlling pigment, it's pupil size controlling how existing pigment gets displayed, a mechanical process dressed up over centuries as something romantic and mysterious. The visual instability in chameleon hazel eyes isn't an accident or a flaw. It means your DNA is holding an almost perfectly balanced tie between light and dark eye traits, neither one ever fully winning the argument. Locked in permanent negotiation every time your pupil moves, in every kind of light, in every emotional state, for your entire life. So there you have it. The 7 different types of hazel eyes, fully decoded, each one carrying its own visual signature and its own hidden ancestral story written directly into your DNA. So there you finally have it. The 7 faces of hazel. The Golden Sunburst, the Olive Mosaic, the Russet Dominant, the Rainbow, the Gray Hybrid, the Flame, and the Chameleon. Whichever one you're carrying, remember this: hazel was never a single color. It was always a spectrum of genetic accidents, scattered light, shifting pigment, and centuries of migration, converging in a small ring of color most people never look at closely enough to truly see. Now, grab a mirror. Take a close look at your own eyes, the kind that actually notices where amber starts and green begins. Which of these 7 do you see staring back at you? Drop it in the comments, tell us your type, and if you're not sure, describe what you see and let us help you figure it out. And if this video opened your eyes to something you'd never noticed about your own reflection, imagine what else is hiding in your DNA, waiting to be decoded. Subscribe for more videos that turn biology into a mirror. Thanks for watching. The past is written into all of us, in the smallest places. Sometimes all it takes is one closer look to finally see it.